We've heard from Gabrielle deVeber, and we are really privileged to have another of Barrie's daughters here today, Eileen deVeber. Eileen deVeber is a professor of nursing, and her work in palliative care, she's probably going to tell us, has special links to her father and his leadership in the field of palliative care. But I'm not going to predict what Eileen is going to say. Eileen deVeber, thank you very much for coming today to speak.
Thank you very much. It's a real honor and privilege to be here at the University of Toronto. Actually, that's where Dad graduated back in 1929. And my son graduated from his master's just a year ago, and he walked by and saw a picture of Dad. Actually, it's the one on the Barrie book that is from his graduating class here at University of Toronto. And the deVeber Institute has been a real passion of his for many years. Dad was very passionate about life, and he was very passionate in helping anyone, and he always wanted to make people feel better in any way, and anyone. And as Gabrielle said, you know, he would help anyone and treat everyone just the same, whether it was the doorman at a hotel or he's met, you know, the Pope even, and the or he's, it doesn't matter who you are, he would treat you just the same. And he just wanted to make everyone feel a little bit better when you left him. And he always managed to do that in many cases. He was passionate about life and the unborn and all the vulnerable populations, people with disabilities, mental, physical, children with Down syndrome, being, you know, preserving their lives. When they were, years ago, they would just want to let children die that weren't having surgery, or they wouldn't want them to have surgery. And Dad would fight for them to have surgery. He took on many different things. He took on different doctors and corporations, hospitals, politicians. He went to Ottawa, the government even, and got some time there with Jean Eklund. She was also a member of the deVeber Institute, and they fought for more palliative care for people, because his belief is that if people had really good palliative care, then they wouldn't want to have euthanasia. If you were comfortable, and that's a huge fear of people, is to have discomfort and pain. So he became a real pioneer of palliative care, especially in children, too. He was a pediatric hematology oncologist, as you've heard, and he didn't help just the patients, but the families. At the funeral, it was really apparent how many people he helped, and there was so many different areas of his life, from Camp Trillium and the deVeber Institute and the Hemophilia Society and the Knights of Columbus, and there was just so many different areas. The Right to Life, Birthright, Catholic, you know, the bishop was there. So he would use all these allies as well, and he had people from the priests and the bishops, they would support him, politicians who he could get on board. He had people that were writers for the London Free Press that would help him to properly quote him, because he was many times misquoted. He was, his opinion was really sought after in many circles, and he was asked to be interviewed, and they've done documentaries as well. He was on television. He did many newspaper articles as well, and he was known to be sort of, he was to be a pro-life person, and a friend of mine was actually a pro-choice person, and she was quite worried. They had to go to a social gathering, and she ended up having to sit right beside him, and she thought, oh my God, what's going to happen? You know, we're big adversaries here. And Dad put his arm around her, and he said, I really admire you for standing up for what you believe in. You know, and he just, that's the kind of guy he was. He really strongly believed about things, but he wouldn't make it a mean kind of fight sort of thing. He would often get facts together and just use the data itself, like the book that's about the complications for women who've had abortions. It's the facts of the research about women who've had major depression and problems after, and those kinds of things. The Camp Trillium was a huge impact on families and the siblings, you know, believing that the whole family unit needed to be treated. And he'd done a little bit of study that 13 out of 15 families who dealt with a child that had died split up after the child died. So that really helped to, fuel the need for the Camp Trillium. So like he really believed in research as well as his compassion and teaching. He also was one of the first, I think it was right when teamwork was starting to come around. There used to be the real medical model where doctors were just kind of almost by themselves, really. And he had a real teamwork approach where he had nurses, social workers. He had a spiritual care a priest that had left the priesthood, and he was a spiritual care worker. And he had this real teamwork approach where he just really valued everyone's opinion. And the art therapist, that came into play when he had, that was just starting out as well. So he supported that, and he had an art therapist starting. And this is a picture here, actually, right when Dad was going for cancer treatments, and I had the honor of being able to help him go to those at the cancer clinic in London. And it just happened he was going by this photo. And the next one, I don't know if we can see the next photo. It's kind of more, is it... or maybe this one, yeah. This photo here is all the artwork of the children who have had cancer, and that was called the Rainbow of Hope photo of all their artwork. And it was just so beautiful and uplifting, all these children dealing with life-threatening cancer, and they're drawing all these pictures of rainbows, and it would light Dad up to see that, because he was the pioneer of that program. And it's a huge building. It was just kind of one of those God moments where he would get to go by that every time. He had to go to radiation treatment himself. So the art therapy, when I was in 1991, I was the chair of the London Palliative Care Committee, and I had him speak at one of our conferences. I was able to get him. I had a connection there. And, he was quite able and happy to help me. He'd retired, and he talked about palliative care in children and the art therapy, and he had some really good photos of the art of children. And things like a child would be on a stretcher and then have a huge picture of the needle above them, and those kinds of ideas where that's what's on their mind, is these big needles of drawing blood, and then having to have IV lines for therapy and bone marrow biopsies. So that would help the children to relieve their feelings of stress about that, but also the team would understand what was on the child's mind. And he also talked about spirituality, and I loved his talk on spirituality. He was a very strong Catholic, and he actually researched religions when he was young and found that religion. His mom, I think, was a Protestant, and he decided to be a Catholic because he thought that was the best religion for him. But he never pushed it on anyone, and he believed that the children should die at home, and that's how he became the palliative pioneer of children's palliative care. He also believed they should go to school when they were, even if they were dying. He had one child that really wanted to go to school. That was what was normal for him. He didn't want to be at home alone, so he fought for the school to have that child go to school. People would say, "What does your dad do?" I said, "Well, he's a child, cancer doctor." They go, "Ooh, that's pretty serious." And I said, "Yeah, and he's on the international work group on death, dying, and bereavement." But I said, "He's a really fun guy, really." And he was a really funny guy. And we miss him terribly, and I'm really honored to be here. And thank you all so much for being here.